Okay, welcome everyone to our next installment of our virtual training series for the County Chairs Association. I know a lot of us who are on the call, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Kovatz. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have a really important session as we finish out the year and we start looking at laying the groundwork for 2022. With our fundraising. So tonight we've invited two of our fundraisers for the county chairs to join us to talk about end of the year fundraising appeals. So before I turn it over to them, a couple of things just to, so everyone's aware of some of the ground rules. One, we do ask that everybody is respectful of each other. We've got a lot of different experience on the call tonight. So as we're going through, just please be respectful. Everybody's going to be muted until we get to the end. And then we'll go ahead and unmute anyone. So if you have any questions as we're going through the session, please put your questions in the chat and we'll go ahead and interject them as the time allows. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. And then as we're here, we should be here for about a half hour, 45 minutes. Ask that you're present during the session. Yes, we will be recording it and we'll be posting it online and we'll share the training deck afterwards. But while you're here, put your phone to the side. You can return the email after we're done. Please be present during the session. And then last is just make sure you're asking a lot of questions. Fundraising is probably the most difficult part of county parties and organizing. So we want to make sure we're asking as many questions as we can. So before I do introduce our presenters for this evening, I know we've got a lot of chairs on the call, but we've got some folks who are not county chairs. If you can go ahead, put in the chat where you're from and who you are, so that way we can introduce each other ourselves. I'd appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and introduce our two presenters for this evening. First is going to be Tom Bowen. Tom is one of the principals at New Chicago Consulting. And Tom has been one of our fundraisers for 6 years now with the County Chairs Association, along with several other clients, including the Mayor of Chicago, other national figures, and has worked in politics, former reformed reporter, and has been instrumental in helping the organization grow. Our next presenter who we'll add in later on, but is Nancy Kohn. Nancy works with a lot of nonprofits along with the association and works closely with Senator Durbin as Senator Durbin's fundraiser. So I will go ahead and turn it over. We'll have Tom start and then Nancy will jump in as we're going and go from there.
All right. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the introduction. Give me 1 second, everyone. I'm going to just share a slide deck for you. Let me turn it on to present mode here. And we'll get going. I'm going to start off here, go through a couple of slides. I'm going to pass it to Nancy, and then we will open it up for questions. So end of the year email presentation. Today we're going to be reviewing a couple tools that will help you in your solicitation, some strategy with those fundraising emails or fundraising mailers, if you prefer to send it that way. The structure of a great message and a few items in there that are important, like compliance and follow-up, and we'll do some time for questions. So a couple tools that you will use. You're going to want some kind of email sending program if you're going to be using email. Now, this could be as simple, depending on your list, as your personal email program or something more sophisticated. But the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure you have a list that's well targeted of folks who could be supporters and it's cleaned up. So for example, you've got the first name and the last name field filled out in there so that when you run it through the email program, the salutation, Dear Tom comes in correctly. So get that list together in Excel format or Google Sheets, depending on if you use those tools, is suitable. Make sure your columns are cleanly labeled first, last, the email, any addresses or zip codes, and that'll be your database. You all have done trainings on Act Blue. That is the best and simplest credit card processor out there for Democrats. I won't go into any further detail on that, but you're going to need to have your Act Blue page made for your donation and get a link out of it. And then an email sending program. We recommend Constant Contact or MailChimp. And Dan has told us that, if there's questions on it specifically, folks can email about it later just for links on where you get those. But they're very, very user-friendly and very, very simple. So those are our recommendations. I personally get a lot more use out of Constant Contact than MailChimp, but again, either of those are good. If you only have 25 emails you're sending to or 50 emails, you can just put that in your personal email sending program. Make sure you don't send all of those folks the email at the same time in the to field. Put that in the BCC field for your end of the year solicitation. And again, this is for small lists, 50 people, or probably less. What makes an email or mail solicitation effective? What is your pitch? Our recommendation is that you do a concise, short message, really no more than 400 or 500 words for an email. And if you're doing a mailed letter, I would try to keep it under 800 words. You can, of course, go a little bit over there, but you don't need to spend a lot of time explaining it. Most folks are going to make a decision based on your kind of opening pitch, who you are, and what the cause is. We always like to be effusive in our praise and thanking people for being supporters or for the good work that they're about to do. That's just sort of, basic human decency there, right? Making sure people feel great about you, because if they like you, they're going to be willing to support you. A personal story is always really important. What's the donation being used for? How's this connected to democratic principles or democratic priorities or successes that you've had in the past or gains that you're going to be looking to make in the future? Telling that personal story is always important. A sense of urgency. People need deadlines. I think anyone who's experienced any kind of party that they have had, right? Hey, I really need your RSVPs in by then, right? That's when you get the most activity from folks, is when there's a deadline, and a sense of urgency is really, really important. We also tend to call this in the email itself, the link, give here now. We call that the call to action. So you have a sense of urgency, please give right now. That's your call to action. Before you get people to read your email, you got to do some great things to get them to open it. So the first thing we recommend is strong subject lines. This is just a short phrase, summarizes the reason of your message, the goal of your communication, or it's something sort of creative and interesting that is going to get folks to read that subject line and then open that email. So we've put a couple examples in here. Help our Sutton County example. Stay Blue. 2022 is our year, and notice how our is in caps there. Sometimes different sort of styles on the text, uppercase, lowercase. You've probably seen some folks use things like emojis before. You can be creative in your subject line to get people to open that email. And make sure it comes from a person, not the organization. A personal name attached to something, usually that somebody knows, is always going to be a higher open rate than just a generic organization. And in this example here, if you got an email from Mary Smith at Sutton.org versus info@Sutton.org, you're much more likely to open that email from Mary Sutton or Mary Smith. Good salutations, just, basic opening here, right? Hello, hi, using someone's specific name. Again, we talked about cleaning up that list in the front end of the conversation here. If you have a first name on it, it's more likely to be personalized, and that good salutation is going to get the folks warmed up the right way. Also, if you're talking to somebody who has any kind of title, an elected official, usually we use the moniker HON as in honorable. Making sure people think you're talking to them directly and that you've taken the time to do a good message is important. So get that part right. And then if you don't have information, you just have an email list because someone signed up on your website. Having something personable on the front end, dear friend, is a good way. Those email sending programs will give you some kind of option, or dear Democrat, dear Democratic supporter, right? Something that's just making sure that you warm them up. Okay. Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you because we're going to start talking about the content of the messages here.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. So the body of your message is obviously critical to motivating the reader to want to make a donation. But we start off with, we want to tell a story about that the reader can envision themselves as part of the story. And so here's 3 examples. Here in Central Illinois, we are fortunate to have dozens of Democratic volunteers who show up year after year to help phone bank and canvass for our ticket. Whether or not you've braved the weather with us or made the telephone calls or you make a generous donation, you know that our county is stronger because of our loyal friends like you. So the reader feels like they know me. They want me to be a part of this. And so the you is very, very important instead of me. It's really important that you use a lot of the yous. And then a couple of other examples of just ways to create this image for the person who's reading the message. One was I referenced back to the Rauner administration. While Illinois is usually considered a blue state, we know that if we are not diligent and focused, we can have a relapse. And then the third bullet point is the best way to win elections is to plan, plan, and plan. Here at headquarters, we've been prepping for 2022. We've outlined our activities for the coming year. So these are kind of mix and matches that you can use some of the language from the first one or the second one or the third one to kind of help paint a picture of energy and enthusiasm for the Democratic ticket. Ready for the next one? So then you want to make sure that you include your fundraising ask. And we strongly recommend asking for a specific amount of money. It is a suggestion, and you can couch it with whatever you can, this amount, or whatever you can afford. But if you don't suggest to people what it is, the expectation of what they should be giving, you're not going to get it. So we really want to encourage you to have specific dollar amounts in your letter. And something else that helps is by associating what the money that they're contributing could go for in the coming year. So we have a few examples. $50 pays for beer and pizza, or pizza and beer. $100 pays for some walk cards, and $150 pays for some yard signs. These are just examples, and you may have more specific examples in your own county, but the idea is to have it in people's mind. If you're using Act Blue, it is really easy to include this language on your Act Blue contribution form so that when people click, the asks are aligned between what they saw in the letter and what they see on Act Blue. Similarly, if you're doing a direct mail appeal where you're going to be doing snail mail, you can have the similar information on your asks and the contribution form that people are going to use to send back their contribution. So it's tying it together so that there's consistency in your messaging. Then we get to, then you've told a story, you've connected with your readers, and then you're going to wrap up your message. And so that is, again, another time to thank the person who's reading the letter. Together we can make history. Thanks for what you have done and all that you will do. There was a little typo there I didn't catch. Thanks for all that you do. Democrats are lucky to have you on our side. So people reading this letter are going to have a feel good, and they're going to want to do something to support the efforts. And then the signature, which is how you sign off. Recommend, that you use the person's name who's the county chair if they're well known, or it could be 2 people are signing it. It's nice to have their signatures scribbled. If you're doing it as a direct mail instead of if you're doing it as snail mail, it's nice to have the person really sign the letter and write a little note. And I'll tell you, it doesn't have to be actually Mary Stein signing it. Anyone could sign Mary Stein's name and just write a little note. Thanks for all that you do. And that handwritten connection really helps. Then we always see, and you'll notice this, that in many, almost all of your email appeals, you get a PS. Someone determined that if there is a PS, it's really going to motivate the reader, because it's going to be the last thing that they see on the page. But I think that you can add something else below the PS, which is listing the names of either your executive board or your board of directors, because they're going to be people that are also well known in your community. And so the person who's reading the email may say, oh, I know John Jones. I didn't realize he was involved. I should really support this. And so that's why you would list out their names across the bottom. It's kind of like when you do a snail mail letter, when you have letterhead and it has people's names listed on the left or on the right of the stationery. Then we have a little bit here about compliance, and Dan is really our expert, but the big thing is that we really want to just urge you is to be cognizant of the rules. You have to put these disclaimers, you have to put the disclaimer if you're a political organization, and you've probably been briefed on this other times, but I just want to reiterate that you need to use this specific language about paid for by your county with your address, and that a copy of a report will be filed. And that language is here. It's on the State Board of Elections website, and it's also on the materials that you get from the Democratic County Chairs Association. And then if you're going to be doing a snail mail mailer, we recommend that you use a union shop to do the printing. If you are printing it, and they'll put a union bug on your letter, and you'll see that when you get appeals in the mail from other political organizations, they always have the bug. And if you're just running it off on a copy machine in-house, you would use printed in-house, labor donated, because that's true. You're printing it in-house and the labor's donated. Finally, after the message is sent, should you send the message? So it's today's December 2nd. It may take you a week or so to get your first letter out. And do you want to send it out a second time? And the answer is absolutely yes. The reason why you get so many emails is because getting more than one email encourages you to give. So we do encourage you, and there's clever ways about doing the email where you can have a message, resend the original message, and on top of it, you say something like, hope that you saw our message. We're getting close to the end of the year. We need your help to make our goals. And just ways to keep people feeling like there's momentum going forward. Then should you reach out through other means such as phone or text? And the answer is absolutely. If you know that you have people that gave you money in 2020 and haven't given you money yet in 2021, they should be on your target list. You as a county chair or other members of your executive committee should help in doing the outreach to encourage people to make their donations before December 31st. Don't assume that just because someone got one email or one letter that they're going to be giving the money. They often need a follow-up letter, a follow-up nudge, I'd like to say. They just could use another nudge to make sure that the contribution comes in. And it's really, really important to thank your donors. If you're using ActBlue, it automatically generates a thank you note, which is great, but you need to double check that the thank you note is aligned with the message that you're using in your appeal. So you don't want to say in your thank you note, because you haven't looked at it, join us for thank you for your support for our July 4th appeal. You want to make sure that it's talking about looking to the thank you for your support. We're going to be stronger in 2022 because of your support, or something like that. You want to make sure that it's aligned with the message from the appeal. And then the question often comes up, do we also have to do a snail mail thank you note? And I think it's possible to tier that, and you decide as a county what level contributor do you goes above and beyond? And those are the people that should get the snail mail thank you. You may think it's people that give 100, or it might be people that give 1,000, but you decide, and they should get a special thank you note with a thank you message. So it's again signed by the county chair with a little thanks, so that the person knows that it was real, that they really received it, that the contribution was received. If people are sending in their contribution by check, everybody needs a snail mail thank you note, because you don't have their emails. So everyone needs to get a thank you note. I'd like to recommend that you try to get your thank yous out within a week, because after a week, it feels like, you know, kind of messy, like, oh, I wonder if they got it, did they notice it, whatever. So try to keep it up, try to get it out, the thank you notes out as quickly as possible. And I think that's it for our formal presentation. And now we're ready to answer any questions or give advice. Secondly, but also I'd like to, sorry about that. If anyone is going to be following the recommendations about doing an end of the year appeal, that I am happy to spend time reviewing your draft language. If you want me to proofread it for context, or you have any questions about that, I'll put my email in the I'll put my email and my cell phone number in the chat, so that you can be in touch with me to review it, because we really want you to be able to be successful. I think the statistic is something like a third of it. This sounds kind of high, but like basically a third, nonprofits get a third of their contributions in December of any calendar year, because people are used to giving money at the end of the year. For nonprofits, they're thinking about the charitable donation, the deduction. And for politics, we're used to having deadlines. So I really, really encourage you to use this opportunity to do an end of the year appeal, and then begin to adopt an annual cycle of email appeals.
So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nancy. I've gone ahead and put it to where everybody can unmute themselves. So if there's any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. But just please be mindful of the ground rules from before. Be respectful with any questions. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself, you can always put the question in the chat and we will ask it. So why don't I go ahead and start just with a good question here. Obviously, we're thinking about end of the year and getting these letters out. When should we have something ready to go out to our supporter list? If we're just sitting down tonight and writing a letter, when do you think we should have something that goes out? Is it next week, a week after? What about timing?
I think that you can send it out starting next week, and knowing that you're going to send it out at least twice. If you send it out next week, then you also are giving yourself built-in time to do some follow-up phone calls to key donors who haven't renewed who gave in 2020 and haven't given in 2021 yet. So I think it's not too soon to start by December 10th.
Okay.
I see in the chat that Kim Rodriguez has asked, what's the number one thing you should not say in an appeal? I think the best way to think about that is what is something that's going to kind of not be in sync with how your donor list might be politically. So if you're, sort of advocating for a particular set of issues and that's not really kind of in sync with your donor list, then the connection isn't going to get made. So I don't think there's one specific thing, but I think you just really want to tailor your message to your audience.
I would say the number one issue I would say also about in your email appeals, do not have any typos. There's nothing that makes someone cringe than if a word is misused or misspelled. And so you really want to have a good system to proof your emails before they go out and make sure that there's a coherent message that's spelled correctly. I think that's a big turnoff.
Wendy LaFaus, when should the follow-up email be sent? I have no problem with anything after 48 hours. But I think in an instance like this with an organization, if people aren't used to seeing an email from you in that sort of time frame, I would then say a default is probably about a week.
I have a question. Yes, if I could jump in here. We have not historically had much luck with online fundraisers. But last year and this year, due to COVID, we normally in December don't have we have our Christmas party, but because of COVID, we voted, or the membership voted, to make a donation to our food pantries, and then we put that in the paper and so forth. So we did that again this year, and I hesitate to ask them. So normally they donate the cost of their dinner, which is $25 or whatever they feel comfortable with. I would feel hesitant to ask them to also donate to us, since, you know, they historically don't donate online, period. What is it possible to maybe do this at the beginning of the year? Is there much success at the beginning of the year, online fundraiser?
Well, you could. I mean, when you think about, you know, you can raise money any month. There is a sense of urgency about 2021 going into 2022. But we could pick this apart a little bit. Have you completed the fundraising for the food bank?
I sent out the letter, and I put somebody else in charge of collecting it and taking the picture at the food pantries. I was going to call him after this meeting to say, how's it going? You know, last year our goal was to give $100. We have 8 food pantries here. Our goal was to give $100 to 7 food pantries, and we ended up surpassing that goal. And we gave to the 8 $137.50. So I put in there this year letter, our goal was to give each food pantry in Ogle County $200, a check for $200. But I don't know, I sent out the letter, it was an email to our email list, probably a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. And so I don't know where we are in that process.
Were people writing their checks to you, to Ogle County Democrats, or were they writing it to the food bank?
They write it to Ogle County Democrats, and then we write individual checks to the food pantries.
Yeah.
And I have to say, here in Ogle County, we do a lot of community things, and to try to get in a paper. More. It's all about party building more. So we've done pretty good, you know, with that. They're not as generous. When you have a cause like that, they're more financially generous. But when we say donate to us, they're not as forthcoming.
Right. So this storyline of how to do an online email appeal, I think there's a few different, you know, one is the culture of the donor list, and that, you know, we know people that skew younger are more likely to give online than people that are older. I mean, there's like a whole bunch of variables, but I do think this is a word that this kind of a deadline that is not an event is something worth exploring. And you might look to see if there's like an Ogle County anniversary coming up in late January or early February. The county was founded, or we elected our first Democrat, or it's the day that Illinois became a state, or whatever something that people could align with. And you could use that as a storyline for your email appeal that would kind of connect with the people that are receiving it and see how that goes. The beauty of doing an online appeal is that it's only your time. There's no cost outlay. You don't have to buy stamps. You don't have to do anything. You can do it all from, you know, you could do it all at home in your pajamas, and no one has to see you, or, you know, you don't have to spend any money to do it. So I think it's really a worthwhile experience to try it. And you could just, instead of doing it at the end of the year, because since people have just been asked to write the check to you to be a pass along, it seems like you'd want to time it a little bit differently to have the best impact.
Right. And I don't know that we'll do this next year, but because it prompted because of COVID.
Well, something
Right.
you might consider, excuse me for cutting you off, but you might consider trying to do the food bank appeal in early November and tie it to Thanksgiving. And then in December, you could do your end of the year appeal. However, as I just said that out loud, because I was thinking I was being so clever, and then I realized the election will happen at the beginning of November. And so you may want to do a bigger push for your county organization in October and keep this, and decide what you're going to do in December. But you probably would benefit from getting more money in before the election than waiting until after.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wendy has another question about new officials in your neck of the woods because of redistricting. A good reason for the ask. The answer is yes.
Yes.
Any reason is a good reason for the ask, but that's a very creative one right there. And I think that sort of gets to, what's the kind of thing that's going to help motivate the most folks into this. It is the party. It is the sort of goal of electing Democrats, or, sometimes in a negative sense, fighting against things that we all disagree with. But I love that idea, Wendy. Go for it. We've got brand new folks that we want to show our, show a strong showing for, or something like that. That's a great idea. Boone County, now I gotcha. Let's show them that, Boone County supports our Democratic officials. So.
Okay, we've got a lot of good questions here tonight. If anybody has any other questions, again, feel free to unmute yourself. We've got a small crowd, and then or if not, go ahead and put it in the chat. And if not, we'll go ahead and start to wrap up here.
Okay.
All right. So
I did put my email and my phone number in the chat. And as I said, I'm happy to review email before it goes out, since I'm so nervous about typos.
We do have one extra one in there from Diana. Best balance between positive and negative messaging. This is an art as opposed to a science. Folks tend to give because of both love and hate in politics. So it really kind of, my recommendation is try love first, and don't be afraid to use hate later on. And I want to add one thing just for closing. Here, I can't emphasize enough a line I think I use most often with anybody I work with. You do not get what you do not ask for, and don't be afraid. Someone's going to tell you if it's too much or if they can't do it. But more often than not, the fear of making that ask is what prevents folks from taking stuff that people are not taking. I shouldn't say that. From getting stuff that people are willing to give you. They just need you to ask for it.
okay, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up tonight's session. As always, we did record the session, so we will post it to our YouTube page in the next few days, and I will send it out to all the county chairs for them to review. And for those who are not already on the county chairs email list, you can go to our website, IDCCA.org, and get signed up, or you can find us on our social media, where we do most of our messaging and our promotional stuff for the organization and for the party. So with that, thank you everyone for coming this evening, and have a good evening.
Have a great night, everybody.